Brand new article coming from Game Rant. Bethesda leaker gives updates on Fallout remasters and Elder Scrolls 6. Real quick in chat, I want to know your predictions for timelines. When do you think Elder Scrolls 6 is launching? I just want a year. Put the year in chat. It'll fill in whether you're on Twitch or YouTube. I need to know what you predict here so that we can judge you when you're right or wrong when it eventually does launch or is confirmed. I have said for a long time, while you guys are putting that in there, canceled, how dare you? I think it's likely that this is like a 2028 to 2029 game. That's been my prediction for a long time. Bear in mind, there were people saying very recently they expected this to launch as early as this year. There was a couple people saying they thought it would launch last year, which was patently insane. But I've always said I think that this is probably 28 to 29. I think it takes them 5 to 6 years, 6, in order to finish it after Starfield. Because what we've seen is that Bethesda's efficiency has dropped, not increased. They don't work faster today than they worked 10 years ago. So why would you think they could magically finish Elder Scrolls 6 3 years after Starfield or 4 years after Starfield? If anything, I think they are taking way longer between releases because their efficiency has plummeted through the floor. And so that's been my prediction for a long time. This, though, is an article looking at some discussions specifically from Jez Corden on the Xbox XB2, I guess, podcast. We've looked at some of these podcast clips before, and it tends to always have some interesting insights and tidbits. As always with this stuff, take it with a grain of salt, but I think you'll see that none of this is particularly shocking or novel as far as claims are concerned. It all seems pretty much in line with what you would expect. They specifically call out a segment at 2:02:13, so let's see what that looks like and listen to the snippet from Jez.
Here soon. You want to capitalize on the success of the TV show. That seems like a big mistake.
I've heard that, like, I don't know how true this is, but one thing I heard was that Fallout remasters are probably a little bit further off than people think, and that Elder Scrolls 6 is still quite far away. So I suppose like getting some of those games out more quickly is probably something they're probably very.
I mean, what is
top of mind for them?
I guess I wasn't expecting Fallout remakes until next year at the earliest, but I mean.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking. Yeah, 20.
To be clear, there are 2 Fallout remaster remakes, whatever you want to call them, expected to come in the next few years. There is a Fallout 3 remaster remake, whatever it is, that is expected to come first. And then there recently has been discussions of a Fallout New Vegas remaster remake, what have you, that is expected to come after the fact, probably after Elder Scrolls 6, because it sounds like it was greenlit in the last 12 months, which is crazy. But I think what is likely to happen is that Fallout 3 remaster remake comes at some point next year for season 3 of the show, around that time. And then I think New Vegas doesn't drop until much, much later, potentially even after the show has finished. And in terms of rough timelines, I mean, that would put it probably 2029 to 2030 for Fallout New Vegas remake remaster, which would have given them like 4 years to put it together, which I don't think is that crazy.
27 maybe for Fallout remake, at least one of them, and then probably the year after or the year after that for Elder Scrolls. I mean,
yeah.
This is one of the big challenges. Yeah, this is one of the big challenges of the gaming industry is. How do you improve efficiency? Because they're like China's coming.
I feel like you should just leave it there because China's coming. Without a doubt, efficiency in the industry has plummeted broadly. It seems, at least it feels that way. Like whether like individual tasks are taking longer or shorter, it feels to the consumer like games are taking way longer to make. They're showing up a day late and $1 short, often still having like technical issues and performance issues, which just feels bad, man. I mean, there's plenty of examples of games that launch and run really well. So it's important to not just focus on the negative, which happens a lot, shocker, in online discourse. There's still plenty of examples of games that have launched and are super polished. Even this year alone, we've seen games like 007 First Light. Lego Batman actually ran way better than I was expecting, and I think most people were expecting, especially given the tech specs that they put out there. Saros ran really, really well and was super optimized and polished. Even Crimson Desert, it started kind of rough, and within like a week or two, they'd fixed pretty much every problem people had with the game. Like, there's plenty of examples of games that launch and run like crap, but there's also examples on the flip side of games that are polished and run well. That's all I'm saying. So don't just focus on the negative. But I think it is fair to say that games are taking longer than they used to. We used to get, like, take Naughty Dog, for example. In the PS4 gen, we got like the remake of The Last of Us to start it off in like 2014, which was like tons of work. They basically rebuilt it from the ground up. Then we got Uncharted 4 in 2016. Then we got The Last of Us Part 2 in 2020, just 4 years later. Since The Last of Us Part 2, they've done some free updates, some remasters and stuff. Nothing like super massive, it seemed. And that's it. It's been 6 years. It looks like Intergalactic is maybe next year. 7 years later. From Santa Monica, we have gotten of course, God of War game with Ragnarok back in 22, I believe Ragnarok was. And that was amazing. That game is phenomenal. Absolutely. But they've also been quiet for 4 years. They probably have Corey's game ready to go next year, but that would put it at 5 years between projects. And so, like, we're looking at all these big studios from first party devs, and they're taking a long time. Ubisoft has delayed pretty much everything imaginable. If you look at other studios like Take-Two, their timelines also have slowed a lot. Granted, they're working on some big stuff. They're working on like GTA 6. So if any game could justify needing 8 years to put together, it's probably GTA 6. Even if you say, hey, they only needed 5 years for Red Dead Redemption 2, I think GTA 5 or GTA 6 probably can get away with demanding more time. You know, I'm not throwing a fit over that. But the reason I bring this up is because it feels like games are taking way longer to put together. And they got to figure that out, because South Korean studios, Japanese studios, Chinese studios, they are working way more efficiently, way faster. They have bigger teams. And yes, there's many reasons for that. They can pay them less a lot of the time. There also is not this anti-crunch culture that's really prevalent in the West and in like Europe, for example. So like, imagine this. If you can get your employees to work 80 hours while paying them for 40, you can get a lot more done. Imagine that. And that's kind of been the secret sauce, it seems like, with a lot of these studios, where if you're in Montreal, if you're in Paris, there's all sorts of extra things you have to deal with, whether it be work from home mandates or family leave stuff, you know, things that give you quality of life improvements, the work-life balance and stuff like that. Do you think like some of these Chinese developers give a crap about work-life balance? Like, I don't think so. Okay. I think if you went to one of these studios in like the heart of China, who is like, they're super hungry, they're working on cranking out some behemoth of a game to take on Western companies, and you go in there like, yeah, can I work from home 3 days a week? And can I also have some paid paternity leave for like 3 months? I think they just chuck you out the window. Like, I don't think they'll even tolerate that. I don't think they're going to engage with you that much. Like, that goes against the company culture of like, we're here to work our asses off. We're not here for whatever you're talking about. You know, you want to not work? Leave. You know, I don't think they care. And that creates a really big challenge when their work is starting to catch up in terms of quality with the Western studios that are bound and limited in these ways. And we've seen this already start to take place at big companies. For example, EA did a bunch of layoffs, as we all recall. EA laid off hundreds and hundreds of people. They restructured a bunch of stuff, but their headcount in their recent filings showed that they had actually grown significantly since their last round of layoffs. How is that possible? You lay people off to decrease your headcount. Why is your headcount going back up after laying all those people off? Well, guess where the jobs went? They hired a bunch of people in India, a bunch of devs in countries overseas, where work is a lot cheaper. So they fire the people in San Francisco, they fire the people in Seattle, they fire the people in Montreal, and they just go hire a lot of the very talented people over in India or in some of the other teams around either the Middle East or in Eastern Asia, because it's way cheaper, and those people are also amazingly talented over there. You know, it's just, you can't really compete when you have to pay this guy over here $150,000 a year, and he wants to work from home 3 days a week, and he needs to be given like healthcare, and he needs to be given paternity leave or like whatever extra benefits. But then you can go over here and pay this guy $10,000 a year. You don't worry about any benefits. Imagine that. And he'll do great work. Even if he does 90% of what this guy did, just hire a second guy. You're still way ahead of where you would have been if you kept this guy. Now, let me be clear. I don't like that. Okay. I wish that weren't the case. I wish we'd be able to hire everybody. Everybody got, a generous wage. Everyone had health care. Everybody had this. If I was the God King of gaming and I could wave my magic controller wand, I would make that happen. That's not the reality we live in. Okay. Like, unfortunately, if a company is trying to decide where to hire people, they're going to go to the people that are a tenth the cost, that are also doing great work, and just give them the job. Because why wouldn't they? Like, I think Rockstar for GTA 6 has something like 1,700 employees in India, specifically. 1,700 employees. And they're doing like animation work. Yeah, Luke, the God King of Gaming. I'm saying, if I were God King of Gaming, I would make things different. But it just is what it is, you know? Like, what are we to do? Are you going to boycott games that use international labor? Is that what you want to do? Do you want like Made in America as a sticker on the box so you only buy games made in America? You can do that if you want. A lot of game development is international, so you're going to probably not be playing a lot of games. But there's not really a clean solution. And I think the average gamer, let's be honest, doesn't probably care enough to look into it. I think the average gamer is like, yeah, but is it fun? And is it is it as expensive? Okay, well, cool. I'll just buy that, you know? That doesn't sound as bad as you're framing it. Well, no, to be clear, like, this is a tale as old as time, that labor tends to move out of countries and markets that are expensive and move to cheaper markets. Shocker, right? Like, outsourcing of labor has been a thing since globalization started to become a big push in the last handful of decades. And it happened in the mid 2000s with software engineers being let go from Microsoft and being hired overseas and replaced with people overseas. My dad worked as a project manager with Microsoft and a lot of other tech companies. And so he went from managing like a team in Texas until that whole team was laid off, and they hired a bunch of people over in India, and now he's managing a team in India. He's in the US supervising their work, but they're all based in India. And that's just happened time and time again. And now it's also happening a lot in game development. One of the theories for a long time was that the studio, when the game was being made by like 200 or 300 people in the studio, if the talent was in San Francisco, you needed your studio in San Francisco. If it was in Montreal, you needed your team in Montreal and the company in Montreal, because that's where the talent was. Now with like remote work, with cloud development, which is something that all of these companies have invested heavily in, where you can have a team in India working on the same stuff that you're doing in the States, and it shares all of the progress back and forth. It makes it way easier to just expand internationally. And then you can get a lot more work done for a lot cheaper. And that's what a lot of these companies have started to do. And that's why some companies are able to increase efficiency and lower costs, while others that are doing it in a more traditional way are struggling to be like really competitive. Luke can actually say my dad worked at Microsoft. He did work at Microsoft, but he was as far as I understand it, he was a consultant. So I don't know if he ever I don't think he ever had a Microsoft employee badge. He was like project manager consultant that was hired by Microsoft on a contract to manage projects for him or for them. And then he would get a new contract to run this next project. And so I don't think he was ever on like Microsoft's payroll. He was always like contracted to be a project manager as a consultant, if that makes sense. But anyway, all of this to say, the meme of China's coming sounds hysterical, sure, at first, but it actually is a very, very real thing that's happening in the industry, and it's going to happen more and more. You think Black Myth Wukong was the only one? No, baby. No, baby. There's a lot more things like that are coming. And I guarantee you, in the next 5 years, a lot of the games we're talking about at like Game of the Year considerations and stuff, a lot of Chinese studios you've never heard of today are going to be in the running for those conversations. Same with Korean studios, Japanese studios, because that's where the money is flowing. There were the stories after Black Myth Wukong where like S-Game, the guys making Phantom Blade Zero, were approached with like metaphorical buckets of money because all of these investors around China saw how big Black Myth Wukong was. We're like, hey, we want to get in on this video game stuff. Let's just throw money at you. Let's just go crazy. We're going to see the benefits of that in like 4 years when those games are finishing up. So absolutely. I think this is a very real thing to keep an eye on.
AAA Chinese games are coming at a rapid clip, and increasingly looks like Western devs are having issues keeping up with that, you know, especially with regards to like mobile and the Genshin. And, you know, there was an interview today actually with, his name, Aaron Keller, the lead developer of Overwatch. And they said, he pretty much said in the interview, they were intimidated by the rapid pace of development for Marvel Rivals. How much content and how many modes they were able to pack in that game in such a very short space of time compared to like what Blizzard and, you know, traditional Western devs seem to be capable of.
I also, maybe this isn't that popular of a thing to say. I'm just going to keep it real. Okay. Cancel me. I don't care. I think there was a good amount of complacency within a lot of Western devs. When there's not competition, I think there's a lot of, it's good enough that goes on. And I think like Overwatch is a phenomenal example of that, where let's just be honest, they could have been trying a lot more or a lot harder, because the moment that they saw Marvel Rivals come in and give them like a big run for their money, there was panic. And they actually overhauled a ton of stuff with Overwatch because all of a sudden they had to try. And I think that that's more of what happened or started happening within some of these really big studios, whether it's Activision. I think Bungie, honestly, is another example of it. I think Bungie is an example where they're like, hey, Destiny 2 is making money right now, so let's just kind of twiddle our thumbs and we'll get Marathon out eventually and whatever. Like, I think that there was just a lot of, it's good enough, let's just chill. And we see that with other companies where it's like, how does Concord exist? I think they originally said that Concord, the original ideation for Concord took place in like 2016. It was like 8 years before it launched. And then they started making it and they founded the studio, and it took years and years and years and years and years to make. It's like, what were you doing that whole time? The story of Highguard, for example, is fascinating. Already there's been reports of what happened with Highguard. Like, Highguard apparently started as a totally separate game mode where it was going to be more MOBA than it ended up being. And then they worked on it and it just wasn't testing well. Players didn't find it fun. So they took all of that stuff out and then tried to reinvent it into something different. It just ended up as an amalgamation of a bunch of different ideas, and it felt really, really disconnected and weird, you know? But this was something they worked on for years. And then apparently most of the work on Highguard, what it would end up being, happened in the last like 12 months. 9 to 12 months. And it's like for years before that, they were just experimenting, I guess. Like, I have to ask, what were you doing all that time? Like, I get it. There's an incubation process, ideation, refinement, and all of that stuff. But like, what the hell were you doing? Like, teams that work really fast can get stuff done real quick when they have a clear idea of what they want to do and they can execute on it. So when I went out to see 007 behind closed doors, I flew to Denmark, where the studio is, in Copenhagen. And it was a beautiful city. I don't know how anybody gets anything done there. It's just freaking gorgeous. Like, imagine just walking down the street, you turn the corner and you see that. Like, what are you supposed to do? I would just stop. You know, it's crazy. But when I went out there and I met with the team and we saw the presentation and everything that they did, this was 8 months ago. At this point, at least based on what they told me, they did not have the tax sim mode. They had ideas for it, but that wasn't even in the game yet. They're like, yeah, so we have this idea that we want to be able to have like a system where you can go back through levels and you can like try different modifiers on it, so we can give you the gameplay that you like, but then you can experiment with it in a new way. And I was like, that sounds awesome. But you're at this point, you're like 6 months out from launch. They delayed it, of course. But I was like, how are they going to get that done? Guess what they got done? Tax Sim. And it's awesome. There's like an entire second game mode in 007 First Light that's fully built out. They could have spun it off into its own standalone game, and they just casually tossed it in there for free. Like, yeah, check it out. Long-term replayability. Have fun. Like but it's a great example of how when you have a clear idea and a team that knows what they're doing, you just say, yeah, okay, this is what we're doing. And they cranked it out and got it done in a matter of months, you know, really, really impressive. But then you compare it to some of these other studios and it's like, you spent how many years experimenting? Like, what is happening? You know, like, how is it that you spent 4 years and then had to restart development because nobody liked the game? Like, how does that happen? How does that happen? So absolutely, efficiency is a big thing. And when he brings up like the Overwatch comparison, that's a big deal. But again, we'll circle back to Bethesda Game Studios specifically in timelines, because that's kind of where this started, and we'll tie it all back together. Right now, I don't know what Jacob's going to title this stream clip. It's probably going to be like game development efficiency or Bethesda and inefficiency, something like that. I don't know. I'll let him figure it out. That's why I pay him. That's why I pay him the big bucks.
Because, you know, it is so expensive. Like, the cost of living in California is very, very high. It means like you can't hire as many developers to achieve, you know, the kind of the dev teams that Genshin Impact can boast is absolutely massive compared to like what's being worked on in some of these Western studios. But I don't know.
It's massive, but it's also not just about size of the dev team. It's also about managing the project. And management in Western studios, I think, has been the consistent weak point. Because at the end of the day, you got to ask yourself, what is the role of a manager in any company? Usually it's broader direction. It's managing the labor and work. And then also their goal is to try and elevate good ideas and squash bad ideas, right? Management is very important in game development and in any company. And what has been a consistent thing in game development over the last, like, 5 years, it seems like there are consistently horrific management decisions being made by companies where you're just like, what were you actually thinking? How did no one say that Saints Row's writing was going to be received poorly? How did no one say that Fair Game $, that whole trailer wasn't going to be received well? How did no one bring up that maybe Highguard shouldn't be framed as the next era of shooters and it's not going to be like a big enough deal to capstone the Game Awards? Like, how did nobody say any of this? Because ultimately it lands on the people that are in charge. It lands on the decision makers. It lands on the idea people. It lands on the managers. And it seems like there has been a consistent issue with maintaining quality management that makes good decisions. Bungie, of course, being the prime example of a mismanaged company that kind of encapsulates all of the horrific decisions that have been made within PlayStation. Especially, but also Ubisoft, horrible mismanagement within Ubisoft. I mean, they've wasted so much time, so much money, so many resources on nonsense. And it seems like now, at least with Assassin's Creed, they might start to be headed into the right direction. We'll see with Hexa what that looks like. Time will tell. You know, I'm optimistic for Hexa. I think that sounds really cool, but we'll see how it comes together. But I think that this is just a big problem within game development, is that for some reason managerial quality has just plummeted. And I think what might have happened and what might be part of this is the live service obsession that kickstarted this generation kind of permeated through the whole industry. And I think what it really truly was this belief that gaming as an industry was headed out of the growth phase and was now in the extraction phase, which is a phase of like the life cycle of an industry that happens, unfortunately, where like you have the lifespan of an industry. It's brand new. It grows a ton in terms of users, and then you start extracting the cash, and maybe like positivity slows and maybe eventually starts growing again. But I think they thought we were right here. And AI, it seems like right now they think that we're like, you know, maybe in here somewhere about there with like just AI as an industry in general. But it is fascinating to see how they thought we were here, so it's now time to suck all the cash out of people. And just, yeah, it might upset some people, but we'll get all the money, it'll be fine. And then they realized that gamers didn't want what they were selling, and it just kind of went to poopy. But how does all of this tie back into Elder Scrolls 6? Well, as we said, efficiency is a big deal. Efficiency is a big problem within the games industry. And that has never been more clearly exemplified than with Bethesda Game Studios. Their efficiency has fallen off of a cliff. And this is why I've said for a long time that I don't think we see Elder Scrolls 6 until like 2028 to 2029, which just so happens to be roughly in line with what Jez is saying his rumblings that he's heard lines up with, which would be Fallout 3 remaster next year at some point, probably season 3 of the show, Elder Scrolls 6 a year or two after that, probably as a launch title for the next Xbox, Project Helix, and then Fallout New Vegas remaster some point after that, whenever that is done. It's rumored that both of these are being headed up by Bethesda Game Studios, and so they will be in charge of those. This is also why I wouldn't be surprised if this slips into 2028, if this is like fully in 2029, and if New Vegas Remaster doesn't come until 2030 or 2031, with Fallout 5 probably not coming until 5 to 6 years after that. I'd guess 2035 to 2036 is when we see Fallout 5. And that's assuming they don't fix their managerial issues, because again, I don't think that they think there's an issue. And that's the bigger problem. Is it's easy to rest on your laurels and just keep doing what you have always done when you think everything is going great. I think it's pretty clear a lot of Bethesda's fans are dissatisfied with how things have been run and how things have been announced and how things have been framed and the quality and quantity of work they've gotten in the years that have passed in the last decade or so. Like, we compare, and I did this with Starfield when it launched, but a great example of this is if we look at Fallout 4 DLC and compare that with Starfield DLC. Well, Fallout 4 has a really clean description of this, okay? So, as you can see, whoops, too far. So the Automatron, stop, Chloe, there you go. Automatron, bear in mind the game launched in November of 2015. March, they have a DLC out. Wasteland Workshop, DLC. These are both smaller. Far Harbor is a full narrative expansion that's like, what, 10, 15 hours long? It's been a while since I played it, but it's robust. The writing is honestly really solid. It's probably the best part of Fallout 4, in my opinion. It's really, really good. That launched within 6 months of the base game. Bear in mind, by this point, they still had not launched Shattered Space, which was a horrifically disappointing 4 to 5 hour expansion for Starfield. Then they launched Contraptions, Vault Tech, and then Nuka World launched in August, all before a year had passed. Within 1 year, they'd done all this DLC, 2 expansions that have new original locations, narrative, questing, all sorts of stuff. They did that within a year, and it took them a year to get Shattered Space out the door, and it was received pretty horribly. It was my favorite anecdote with Shattered Space. As you can see, like, you know, Metacritic 62, Steam 5 out of 10. My favorite anecdote for Shattered Space was when it launched, I remember downloading it and I started to play it. And I had set aside like the whole day and night and then the next day to play it and get through it. Because I was expecting like Far Harbor. I was expecting 10, 15 hours. And I remember I booted it up. I played it. And I was like, just chugging along through the story. And I was like, once I get to like maybe the point of no return or something, maybe 10, 15 hours in, I'll stop and I'll go explore like the map and everything. I accidentally finished it because it was so short. I was like shocked when it was over. I was like, wait, that's it? What? But that's just how it is. Like that, it's absolutely crazy. It's like 5 hours long. If you go and do all of the additional little bitty side stuff all together and like fully explore the new landing zone and everything, and loot every single box and everything, you can probably stretch it to 10 hours, maybe. But it was like laughably short, and it was mediocre too. There was like nothing there. So I tweeted out, I just accidentally finished Shattered Space. Accidentally finished it. It's like really, really amazingly short. I remember I reloaded to a previous save to see if I had accidentally like skipped dialogue options or something to extend it. But no, it's like, what just happened? And people started commenting on the tweet, like the fanboys that hadn't started playing yet were like, Oh, you clearly rushed through it. You probably use console commands to skip stuff, enter God mode, whatever. I don't buy this for a second. By that evening, those comments started to be deleted. They were going back and deleting their own comments because they're like, oh shoot, it is really short. Like, oh God, darn it. But it was because a lot of people wanted it to not be what it was. And so even Bethesda fans who were playing kind of defense for Starfield for a long time had to admit it's pretty mediocre, man. Like, it just is. And this has been my frustration with, I think, the Starfield community especially, but BGS more generally, is that type of behavior doesn't make BGS better. That doesn't make their games better. That won't make Elder Scrolls 6 better. It just won't. If you want them to be better, you have to tell them that this sucks. This is bad. When I see Todd go and do an interview with somebody on like a podcast somewhere, and they blow smoke up his butt, and then they're like, yeah, so a lot of people don't like Starfield. I love it though. And Shattered Space, I thought was really good. Can you tell us about your process? Like, that's not going to help anything. You got to be honest. So, Todd, Shattered Space, what happened? Leave it there. Ask him. Well, a lot of people really liked Shattered Space. Actually, Todd, a lot of people hated it and thought it was bad. Help me understand. How does that happen? I just want any sort of pushback to give any sort of feedback that's direct and, like, let's be real, honest and direct with them. Like, I feel like there is very little honest, critical feedback that makes its way to Todd, because I think that he's kind of at the top of his heap. And unless he's looking on social media for specifically critiques, I don't think he's seeing any of it. We even saw that he talked in a recent video how he goes to he goes on Reddit to the no sodium Starfield subreddits and stuff to get feedback from the community and everything. I'm like, so you're like specifically looking for the hug box feedback instead of critical feedback from people who have historically been your fans. Like, people ask all the time, Luke, why do you talk about Starfield and BGS so much? And like Elder Scrolls 6 so much? It's because I'm a fan, dumbass. Like, they used to make my favorite games consistently. They used to just hit it out of the park constantly. Been a minute since they did that, in my humble opinion, and it's too bad. I want them to get back to what they were capable of doing, because a lot of that talent is still at the studio, but there is something on a foundational or mechanical level that is preventing the studio from reaching their own potential. And my frustration is that it feels like if you bring that up, there is like no engagement with that. Like, there's just, they don't want to talk about it. It's like, you can't, no. It's actually great. It's actually really, really good. It's really good. So, it's just, I hope they figure it out. I hope they figure it out, because I would love to see Elder Scrolls 6 come out just swinging and killing it. But it looks like we're going to have to wait until probably 2028 to 2029 before we see it. And then New Vegas remake will come at some point after that. But they've got to figure out efficiencies. They've got to figure out what they're doing, because what they're doing right now ain't really working, it seems. Toxic positivity, I think there's a bit of that. I think it's also just what happens when, I think what you consider to be your KPIs matters. Like, what are the key metrics that you care about? And I think for Bethesda, it has turned into concurrent player counts, or maybe total player counts. They talk about those a lot. They care a lot about the money spent in creations with paid mods, how many paid mods are being bought and downloaded and engaged with. They care a lot about like the feedback from the diehard community that is really positive. Like, they're looking at that. Game Pass, they care about hours played. So they would rather people play it, like one person play it for 1,000 hours than 10 people play it for 10 hours. They'd rather have that one super diehard guy, because again, Game Pass is all about hours played. So I think that their metrics have just led them down a path where they are hyperfixating on the most diehard of the diehard fanboys. And that's caused a lot of the other people to fall off by the wayside, because they're not looking at their feedback, because they're not part of the KPIs that they really consider. Why is bro wearing a Concord tee? Why aren't you? It's okay to be jealous. It's okay. It's okay. Got it for $7. Can you believe this thing was on clearance? Can you believe that? I can't. It's remarkable. Really remarkable. took my thing.